Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on what certainly in the UK is a really gloriously sunny day. I hope you get a chance to enjoy this from your garden. My name is Janine Chamberlin. I run the talent solutions business for LinkedIn in the UK. And I'm thrilled to be joined by Wray, who is the head of recruitment strategy at Sainsbury's, and Matt Elliott, who is the chief people officer for Bank of Ireland, and learn a little bit from their experiences today. I know I don't have to tell you this, but over the last few months, HR around the world, literally in every organization, has been through rather a lot, one might say. Some companies have had to digitally transform overnight, everything change, everything go. And obviously all the while looking after our employees, making sure that everybody is safe, making sure that everybody can be productive. It's been quite a whirlwind, I think, probably for all of you. Certainly, I know from Chris and Matt that they have been through it all, and they've led these changes from the front. So I'm delighted that they're here to share their experiences with us. Now, what I'd like to suggest is that we first take a quick look back and see what has unfolded over the last couple of months. And then we can see how and what Matt and Chris are considering to take forward in terms of their learnings and what the future might look like for all of us. So with that, I just wanted to start with the question, what are some of your key learnings from the last couple of months? And I'll start with you, Matt, if that's okay. What are you really taking away from this period? And thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Janine. Thank you. And hi, everyone. It's great to be part of this. And well done to everyone on the great work that you've been doing. I think it's been a really important time for HR in the broad sense to be able to step up at this time. And it's undoubtedly been happening, loads of amazing stories. So well done, everyone. And, you know, at Bank of Ireland, we've got presence in many countries, but mainly in Ireland, obviously, in ROI, and in the United Kingdom too. So that's where our main colleague base is. So that'll be familiar with, obviously, many of you. And we, at the start of this, felt like it was going to be a really defining period for us, both with society, so how we served customers through this period, really recognising that at this time, you know, the continued banking services would be really key for society. And so we saw an opportunity to really support through a difficult time our customers. And likewise, you know, we thought about the same thing from an internal perspective, recognising that our colleagues would be affected in many ways. Of course, we all are in some way. And so how could we really bring our culture to life? Because we've been on a path, particularly over the last couple of years, of really seeking to transform our culture. And I personally felt that over the next few months, we'd probably define really how that was going for us and either accelerate it hugely or the alternative would have been not, right? So it's been a really pivotal time for us. I think, you know, from a customer perspective, we've got to a point that we're proud. We've provided a lot of support to personal customers and to businesses and corporate clients to get through this period. That has had our colleagues feel proud. And that, in a sense, has obviously helped how people are feeling within the company. And then I'm very proud with how we've also supported our colleagues through the period. And the whole thing has kind of come together, therefore, and been a really galvanising effect at what undoubtedly is a really difficult time too. So it's sort of a strange outcome in a way. The difficulties have really brought us together in addressing them. And funnily enough, gets us to a place where we've progressed. And so we do a regular pulse survey. We've seen engagement go up 10% as an example of how it's really just driven in the company a pride, and I think brought our culture to life. I've noticed we've made decisions, Janine, in particular, really quickly and with a quality that, if we're honest, we know we weren't doing, and it was one of the things we were trying to focus on, is why aren't people comfortable and confident to take the initiative and do what they think is right? We've seen that completely change over the last few months. And so actually, you know, in lots of ways now, our challenge is to capture that different way of working and maintain it moving forward. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense.
Yeah, thank you very much. It sounds like that pressure almost has been quite good for your business to progress very, very quickly. And Chris, what's it been like for you at Sainsbury's? Similar experience, different? Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so I couldn't agree with, hi everyone, and thanks very much, Janine, for having us. But Matt, couldn't agree with you more. Is I think that single focus, and if we look at Sainsbury's, is that whole feeding the nation in overnight. We've now been in lockdown, now coming into week 10, I think. I'm losing sometimes the weight, but let's say week 10, just before it started to kick off, is the whole company has come together. And I couldn't be any prouder. Is our main single focus as a business was, how do we feed the nation? How do we help vulnerable adults? How do we help people get food supplies? And we went through that peak where people were panic buying, and very much is, and it sounds cheesy, and I'm not one for cheese, but the communication from our leaders has been so key, whether that's to our customers. Mike has been phenomenal, and whether that's to our colleagues. And we know is that I've got a luxury. I work from home. We've got colleagues in the front line, which is predominantly most of our workforce, who are out there, being there every day, helping, supporting, and feeding the nation. And that proud moment just to help support them. And that's having to adapt our technology in a way that we've never utilised the technology before. But everything that very much centred around is, how do we keep our colleagues safe? So how do we get prospect glass in the store? How do we help individuals and colleagues ensuring that they have got the right equipment to work? And how we've done it overnight, and Matt touched on it a bit, is that this single focus, where things usually would take 6, 12 months to happen in the business, or 3 years, we've seen things happen within 48 hours. Or this whole piece where we need to have a meeting for a meeting sometimes, actually, that all went away. And I like to call it a bit of a democracy, where being on phone calls, people were actually listening to people. And I think that's been, for me personally, it doesn't seem to be the loudest person in the room anymore. It's actually everyone's listening and everyone's moving at pace.
Thank you for sharing that. And I love what you said about the communication from leadership has been so strong, which I think is so important. And actually, I want to ask both of you a follow-up question, because you allude to this idea of, like, there's pressure, so we create this single focus, which seems really hard under normal circumstances. So what is that driver that all of a sudden we can have really crisp and really inspiring communications from leadership? Have you got any thoughts around what drives us in these times outside of the pressure? I'm just really curious about your thoughts on that.
It's how we capture the brave, and I call it being brave. Is I've seen people make decisions where they feel the autonomy to have that, and how can we bottle that up? And I think that's an unknown question at the moment, is how do we not lose that? And how do we take that piece of braveness that individual has made that decision? Don't get me wrong, is we make some decisions and we fail, and that's fine. But it's having that braveness to make that decision. And I think sometimes in the old world, as I call it, people didn't want to do that. And how do we start to, as leaders and as a business, start to really make people feel, actually, continue doing that and continue making those decisions and continue to learn as well?
Matt?
Yeah, I think for us, listen, it's brought to life. We talk a lot about purpose nowadays, don't we, for companies being important, for people working in companies. I mean, frankly, I think we've been in a position where we're continuing to recover our relationship with society, even post-financial crisis. In the financial services sector, understandably, there is work to do in terms of recovering that position of trust. I think what's really helped here is just we've been able to galvanise that connection with society, and our people really feel that sense of pride return. So on a large scale, in the same way Chris is saying in terms of keeping the country fed, and thank you, Chris, by the way, our local supermarket is Sainsbury's. You have kept my family fed. I appreciate it. And me. Thank you for that. So, but for us in banking, it's given that much clearer sense that we have been an essential service. And, you know, that appreciation to Wray with society, I think, has come back. Within the company then, I'd go back to the decision-making element. I think people have been confident to make calls, and trust has really re-emerged for us. So people know they're going to be backed. We've moved so much quicker and made decisions that are high-quality decisions, no regrets. But if we hadn't, it's okay. And I think there's a much better sense of that in the company now. And the fundamental element that's come through is just trust. There is an inherent trust now, where, if I'm honest, there wasn't before. We were having to work on establishing a better sense of it's okay, we do want you to make these calls. We had quite a big discussion in the organisation about the amount of bureaucracy and governance that we'd got, and how that was getting in the way, potentially, of colleagues just feeling they could do the right thing. And that sense, that fog just cleared over the last few months. And so we didn't change our governance. We've still applied as a regulated institution the right decision-making protocols. Okay, so whilst we'll look to streamline them, actually, because I think there is something in how you can do all that better, it didn't get in the way in the last 3 months. So it has sparked an energy, but it's just brought about, as I say, a layer of trust that I frankly don't think we had before.
That's amazing. Thank you both for explaining that. And so, to move on maybe to some more specific topics, Chris, I'm going to start with you. I wanted to understand specifically around talent acquisition and employer brand, whether you have made significant changes. Have you had to pivot your strategy? And if so, how did you do that?
So, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge we're in a lucky position. And when I say lucky during a pandemic, I'm very careful on how I use that but we haven't froze any recruitment at all. We are still recruiting, but if you look at the job market we are tracking it constantly, there's 56% less jobs than there was this time last year when you speak to the job boards, so you speak to the various job boards out there in the market. What we've had to do is we went through growth in regards to how do we get more people into our organisation. And very much from a strategy point of view, we had to look at how do we take away the friction. So what we had to review the whole process to go okay, we need to get more individuals in the store. Reason why is we need more support for our colleagues. We need to get more products on the shelves. How do we absolutely flip our process up in the air and go, actually, what's the best way that's safe enough to get people in the store, do the essential checks, and get them in? And that was removing our online application. So we completely moved. We were getting inundated with application. We have an online assessment. We completely removed the online application, removed the online assessment, and asked people to go into store. And the store would then do the relevant checks and start the individual as well. So we've done that, as well as then creating a redeployment portals for the rest of the UK. So we had over 250 businesses registered to help redeploy their individuals into our business, and we help feed those through a funnel. But that's the one thing that's taught me a lot from a recruitment lens is the friction that's been in our process, because it gave us a real focus to go, actually, why is that there anyway? And do we actually want to bring certain things back, or do we want to actually go, we're never doing that again? And that's been very much the focus, is to really look at our processes and understand the experience. And I think candidate experience is key now, more than ever, that how we treat our candidates, we have to treat them. Are we perfect? We are nowhere near perfect. And what we are still learning is through the process. But people are having more, we're seeing a trend here in the market. People have more time to respond. People have more time to give good feedback, but people also have more time to give negative feedback as well. So it's all about how do we respond to those individuals, whether that's a high volume role where we get a large number of applications to other roles where we get one or two, and how do we keep that experience key? And that's been very much the focus now, is that candidate experience is key, and how do we want to be remembered? Because I'm a big believer is that it doesn't matter what you've done before COVID-19, that's out the window. That's completely gone. It's how you're remembered is right now. And I read a brilliant article from Airbnb. They had to give us some tough messages out there in the market. I think it was 20, don't quote me on this, 25% reduction. Like, the letter from the CEO was brilliant, so thoughtful. What they give their employees, just letting them keep their laptop for a period of time, because most people don't have laptops. The recruitment team had to pivot from being high growth to then outplacement support. Now, that's a business that's, in my eyes, is going to be remembered as how they dealt with this, than an EVP that has got a lovely image and a lovely corporate video. Is actually, what did you do to help people? How did you look after your colleagues? How did you look after your candidates? That's how you're going to be remembered after this pandemic.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And it's interesting what you say about actually removing an online process. So if I understand it, and I'm putting words in your mouth here, but are you tailoring the candidate experience to the specific type of role that you're recruiting for?
So that was just for our retail roles. But other things is remote-based working that's interesting as well, is that how do we then set people up for success who are home workers? How do we get their laptops to them? How do we do professional roles as well? So that's the thing that we're working through at the moment, and continuously improving. And that's the one piece of advice I say is, don't try and get it perfect day one. Continue to look at your processes, continue to learn, and continue to adapt. Don't try and go for perfection, because let's face it, things are changing at such a pace. You're going to have to change in a couple of weeks anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you make a good comment about being remembered for how you treat your colleagues, or if you look at it from a leadership perspective, perhaps your employees. So Matt, I wanted to ask you to maybe expand a little bit. You said that there's an increased sense of trust, and that must come in response to the way that people have been treated at Bank of Ireland. So when this unfolded, what kind of things did you do to look after your employees, whether they had to shift to working from home or maybe be protected to be safe at the front line? What kind of things did Bank of Ireland put in place?
Sure. Well, it's interesting, Chris, talking about essentially the substance of what you're about, opposed to the presentation of it. And I couldn't agree more. I do think post all this, well, now and moving forward, candidates are going to value what you are about and proven to be about. And as I said, I did think I always felt like this was going to be a bit of a defining moment. You set the course one way or the other with your own colleagues. And so firstly, we just absolutely prioritised from the start safety of colleagues, safety of customers, but in the light of painting the picture that we're here to serve society at a really crucial moment. And so that, we have a duty, but we need to take care of ourselves as we execute on that duty, right? And so practically, that's meant a range of approaches, because we've got people in very different working situations. Of course, it's meant actually a lot of the things that Sainsbury's have done in terms of, if you like, the branch environment for us, the physical environment, interacting with customers, whether that be screens being pulled up, distancing markers, all those things that I guess we're familiar with in retail environments. We've applied within the branch network, chaperones in the busier branches to help with managing queues, those kinds of supports. What we've seen a huge shift in, though, from our perspective, has been the amount of home working, of course. So we were introducing more flexible ways of working. We had 30% of our colleagues, we've got about 10,000 people, and about 30% pre-COVID were working maybe a day a week at home. And the rest weren't actually equipped to do so. We've gone from that to now being 70% plus working from home all the time. So there's been a huge change in the capacity, obviously, from a technology perspective, but also the challenges that brings, right? And I'm expecting my kids to roar in through the door at any minute. We've all got a version of that as new things to cope with. And it is challenging in all seriousness, and not easy, obviously, for many. And so for me, well-being has become a crucial part of the solution to that, irrespective of concerns about going into a branch, going into a building, where many of our IT people, for example, have needed to keep going into our admin buildings, if you like, and those who are working from home really for the first time. Everyone's got concerns And I think everybody's needed support with well-being. So our fundamental program has been a 10-week approach. Some of you will be familiar with Carl Henry, and others won't, but in Ireland is well known around well-being. And so we've run a focused program over a 10-week period. And so the company as a whole has engaged in a program together of staying well. And we've run it on a financial well-being perspective. Obviously, we've got colleagues with concerns, partners may have been furloughed or made redundant, etc. So there's financial well-being, mental well-being, and physical, taking all elements of that. We've utilised an app, which thankfully we just launched pre-COVID as part of a wider support around well-being in the company. We've now got 4,500 of our 10,000 colleagues using that app, and it covers, well, events like this actually, so live stream events, all recorded that they can watch back on across all the range of supporting activities, video clips that may be supportive and helpful. So a huge amount of supports that are there for them to be able to utilise. And we've also utilised social media for the first time with our own colleagues. So we've got an Instagram account for this programme. We're now close to 2,000 colleagues on that out of 10, which really just amazes me because we'd not got into that kind of space before now. And there is a huge appetite from our people to share with each other their stories about how they are keeping well. And I think there's nothing more powerful, actually, than when your colleagues within the company start to tell the story and help each other, effectively and just join in. And so well-being's been absolutely key in terms of the support. And I won't say much more about it now, but learning, likewise, supporting all our colleagues, managers and leaders with how they can respond in a tailored way. We've been running a programme, Leaders with London Business School, for example. How can they be doing their best for the organisation and for their colleagues at the moment? So learning's been crucial. Finally, recognition. We've had a huge appetite for colleagues to recognise each other. And so we've created a way online within the company that they can do that. So recognition, well-being and learning wrapped with comms like we've never seen, because there's a daily appetite for an understanding as to what was going on. And now we're into more of a, if you like, programmatic element so that people can access the right support for them. So hopefully that gives you a flavour as to what we've been doing to respond. And know we've done everything we can from a company perspective to help our people at the most difficult time.
Yeah, it's really impressive to think that all of that has, been implemented in such a sort of short space of time. And you've both actually mentioned technology, and so I think there's a lot in sort of virtual environments that you've been able to establish at Bank of Ireland. Chris, I know you have done a lot of work to adapt the technology at Sainsbury's as well. What are some of the highlights? What are some of the things that are really working for you well right now?
It's interesting. So I remember writing the business continuity paper for interviewing before this started happening. And I think in my paper I said is we have the technology, it's just we don't sometimes use it and we want to see people face to face. So we were in a very luxurious position when we had to move all of our interviews to virtual for our head office professional roles. That was more of an adopting and how to utilise and what are the top tips and what you need to think about as well. And when doing a virtual interview, I think it's a lot easier doing the interviews because you can get more people in a room and virtual room together than usually it would take 2 or 3 weeks to get people face to face. It's now taking 48 hours because diaries allow it, etc. So technology has its place. I'm a big believer. We have brought technology forward. So, for instance, in recruitment, we have a centre where hiring managers can call and ask questions, etc. We moved that to live chat. And the uptake in live chat is managers are telling us this is easier, this is a lot better to communicate with. So it's given us a lot of opportunities to really think about is the way we communicate and looking at our processes, can we be doing it better? And technology has really allowed us to do that. Just one comment I wanted to pick up on Matt's comment is about when people are running through the door. About the thing I love about this piece is we're getting to see people's real authenticness. It's whether when the children are running in to the room or being able to be in this place now is a big game changer. That the community we have now and the interaction with our colleagues is a huge game changer. And that's all been done by technology, if we think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. It's lovely to see how things are just blending more, and I think people can be more of their whole selves at work in front of a screen. I think it's a really, really nice change to see. And so, as you've both been through a lot of change very quickly, where do you go from here? What is next on your agenda in terms of transformations, whether it is to do with technology or processes? What's next on your calendar, on your radar to transform? I'll start with Matt. We'll ping pong.
Okay. So the sum effect of all of this is at the most challenging time we've seen the best change in ourselves, and so we want to capture it, obviously. And figure out how we can build on it as well as just maintain it. And so I've touched on decision making a couple of times. We're figuring out how we can make sure that colleagues have got the confidence to keep working the same way in that regard. It's going to require us to commit to actually being clearer about how people do make decisions, right? So they can be more comfortable. We don't feel we can leave it to chance. It'd be fantastic if we just could say, listen, there's one, just keep doing it, everyone, and know that will be the case. Realistically, on that particular one, I do think the circumstances in the sense of crisis obviously had a significant impact. And so that's one area. Another is around, we're looking at our values as an organisation. They came to life in this period, so we've made good progress on them, but they've come to life in a way that we've not seen before. And thinking about what have we seen differently in ourselves that we need to embed in there. And I mentioned the word trust. So whilst we're doing that work, I think there's something about us working on trust, right, as opposed to just assuming it to be inherently the case. And then we've also touched on tech as well. And in all honesty, we were not in a position where we were particularly from a HR perspective and resourcing perspective using technology to great effect prior to this. It has supercharged us in that way. I mentioned the wellbeing app, but also we were very concerned as the crisis began that when colleagues would be working at home, if they didn't have bank equipment, we'd be out of touch with them. And so it really did fast track us on a secure part of our internet site now that colleagues can password into with their usual password. So they can access all our materials, all our supports and all our communications, but on their own device. Likewise, they can access now all our learning offer on their own device as well as well-being. So I'm really looking at how can we expand that, because I'm doing all of those things, if I'm honest, today on my own phone, as opposed to when I'm actually online with the bank. I quite like it. It's quite nice to dip into these elements. And I think, the feedback we're getting is that colleagues like that too. So I see us expanding that further and really building on the start it's given us. And in particular, think about that start I mentioned around real social media usage for us in terms of the Instagram account. There's always going to be a well-being element to what we want to support colleagues with, but it won't be as heavy as it is right now. So how might we bring in agendas that remain important to us, like inclusion, and utilise an account like that to generate further colleague inclusion in a way that's clearly working for people who work in the organisation, right? And these are new experiences for us we'd not had before. So technology is undoubtedly going to play a key role, but all of this is getting us to think about how, moving forward, we've made this shift. How do we maintain it and build on it? And what will our colleague experience look like in the future? And we're more ambitious about that than where we were, to be honest, coming into the crisis now, because it has fast-tracked us in a very short period of time. So there's lots to figure out, but it's shifted our ambition completely.
Amazing, thank you. And Chris, what about you? What's next for you?
Yeah, and I'm going to come from an external candidate point of view, from a recruitment lens, is that we're very much looking at for 2020, 2021 is creating those candidate experiences. So less transactional, giving that experience to the candidate, that really attracts and engages the quality and diverse talent Like, how do we start to really, really attract the individuals and give them that brilliant experience? And that's got various enablers, whether that's putting the candidate is the heart of everything we do, and that is, as a recruitment team going forward, even more than ever, is the candidate is the heart. Leveraging our data. So we are doing a lot of data analysis on our candidates at the moment and holding a lot of survey. There's a big appetite in the market is feedback. Candidate more than ever, our candidates are telling us they want to understand more feedback, learning the appetite to really improve themselves. And then also looking at our processes to really remove the zero friction from the process and not make candidates jump through hoops for the sake of it.
Yeah, great. And I think it's wonderful, actually, you're thinking about feedback, because it's so important as a candidate to know why you perhaps didn't progress for a role so that you can learn from it and take it somewhere else, especially right now. I think that's going to be really important. So I'm going to ask my final question to both of you, and then we will open it up for questions from the stream. So anyone who is listening in or watching this right now, get your questions ready, pop them into the Q&A box, and then we can ask Matt and Chris after this one. My final question is, what do you see as lasting changes? Maybe it's all of it, maybe it's everything you've just described, but what are some of the changes that we will take with us into the not only current, during pandemic, however long that may be, state, but also post-pandemic? What are we going to take away? Matt, do you want to start?
Yeah, great, sure. So I've been, to be honest, even before my time at BOI, I've been here for 15 months now. So for years, I've been a really strong advocate of, and Chris touched on it, bringing the human side into the organisation. I think for too long we had this separation of the work you and the personal you. And I do think that the last few months and this whole situation presents us the opportunity to once and for all remove that blurred line. I think it's become blurred, which is good. It used to be quite a hard one. I think that's partly why we've had, in many organisations, a really great response in terms of how people are feeling about their company and the work they're doing. And I would really like that to be the lasting effect, is you can't really disassociate one from the other now. As Chris said, we're sat amongst at home doing our work, or same I think is true for colleagues who are still working in a physical place with customers. So I think the human side coming into work, blurring that line, but also from a leadership perspective, I've seen that too. Far more easier for leaders to engage, to communicate in a way that really engages, right? Because it's real things that are affecting us all. And I think that's brilliant training to continue as the sense of crisis does abate and to maintain in the future. And finally, I'd just say, from a resourcing perspective, we haven't stopped, but we have slowed down. There are still critical skills that we absolutely need to bring into the organisation that we're still working on. We have been, 100% virtual in that approach. But we've also noticed in terms of how candidates are looking at us, more direct traffic in terms of through our corporate website and to our careers site. And listen, I think that's, whether that's short-term or ongoing, I don't know, but I do think there's a fundamental shift here in terms of candidates will really want to know the truth and the substance about a company, and the stories and reputation will come out of this period. And so I think it's a really important period as a result. And that will be true over the coming months, just as it's been for the last few. So I see the war for talent, if you like, being just as sharp as ever. OK, there's a particular experience this year. We will see unemployment rise, etc. But I don't see that being a sustained point. And I think people are still going to have a choice, particularly for key skills. Right. And we're still very much in a competitive position where we have to bring through the story of the company and what we're really about.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah,
what
so
will you take?
Things I'd like to see stay is this remote-based working. I hope it does stay, and I give people's degree of flexibility of working from home. But there needs to be a decision soon, because yes, we're working from home. Is it true remote-based working organisations? We've lifted office practice and put people working 9 to 5 at home. Remote-based working is working different times of the day and being flexible at different points. So I think businesses need to just work through that at the moment and learn from it and understand is where do they want to take it? How flexible do they want to make their working hours? But the one thing that's good that's come out of this is that people used to not want to come on camera. And now you see people are like, the camera's on, the engagement, just that you know they're listening. And before, if you look back 6 months ago, there would have been probably one camera on. And if someone had walked in a room, they would have been like, shh. Now is actually, it's fine. Children are coming on the laps. And I like that. But also we need to be careful, because people do, there is that fine line is, here's some of me, but actually some things I want to keep at home. So it's just keeping that in the back of our mind is, and that's so important, is how do we upskill our hiring managers, our leaders, to make sure people feel that it's okay to not have the camera on sometimes. It's okay not to turn up for a pub quiz because I'm homeschooling my children at the moment. Those are the things that all businesses are trying to work through. And I think each business will be unique in how that works, because it depends on what service they offer, a consumer or business to business, etc. But the one thing I do not want to lose is this authenticness of having a good conversation and having a bit of more engagement. Like I feel that even my team and myself, and I'll speak on behalf of them, is I feel a lot more engaged with my team. I feel like I talk to them more. I think we have better conversations. My team's based all over the UK. It's hilarious that, like, before, and I use the example, they're setting up coffee chats. It's optional. It's coming on a Friday afternoon. They were on the phone at about 6 o'clock together. Before that wasn't happening. So this whole sense of engagement, I don't want to lose that just because lockdown lifts and everyone just goes back. So it's how do we hold on to the engagement and people working together?
Yeah, absolutely. And also really resonates what you're saying about, I think I've seen a terminology around this digital presenteeism, right? It's not okay if we all start to work flexibly, but then we actually expect everybody to be on every single Zoom call, because I do think that Zoom fatigue is real, whether it's Zoom or Teams or, whichever tools people are using. I'm going to stay with you, Chris, for this next question. So the question is coming from the stream, from Richard. Thank you, Richard. The question is, what are you doing to prepare for a phased return, followed by a business as usual state, whatever that may be in the future? Some employees are desperate to come back to the office, others less so. How are you thinking about that at Sainsbury's to bring people back in a phased return?
At the moment, we've been told there is no change from the Prime Minister once he gave out his announcement. People are still going into stores and working. And if you think about it, it's about 1% are only in our home office working, in head office, etc. Predominantly our colleagues are frontline facing. So they're all out there at the moment. So, and if you think about it, we've got around about over 180,000 colleagues. So it's small to me, as our focus is very much is how do we keep our colleagues in the front line safe, and how do we do that? But I always worry about is, and we're constantly doing surveys, is because I'm in a very lucky position, right? I've been working from home for the last 6 years. My previous job, I was home based, and at Sainsbury's I do 2 or 3 days a week with flexible working policy. We have colleagues who they're working in the bedroom. And that's how we need to realise is we have colleagues who are in maybe a bed sit and don't have the space. And that's where we're trying to really understand is how can we support those individuals. Like I had someone in the recruitment team is her husband works on the front line. And she does our high volume recruitment. And we had to flex her hours to help her relationship, because if we hadn't changed her hours, she even says this herself, is that it would have affected her marriage because they wouldn't have seen each other for the last 10 weeks. So it's taking case by case at the moment and really understanding from a survey point of view. But as I say, is predominantly most of our colleagues are in stores.
Yeah, that's an incredibly different environment from some other organizations, obviously. Fascinating. 180,000 people and nearly all at the front line. What about you, Matt? How are you thinking about this return to whatever the normal might be?
Yeah, firstly, definitely for us, social distancing affects the capacity that we've got in our buildings. So it's a challenging one to communicate with colleagues. We're sort of part way through that, but the message really is that as restrictions are lifted in country, whether that be ROI or UK, on mobility and movement, actually for us, a fundamental constraint is safely, obviously, managing people within a building. And so we've done all the work in terms of what our numbers look like in that regard that we can safely run with. And we're messaging to colleagues that really there's a dependency around social distancing before we get a capacity return that gets us back to whatever the new normal is. And in terms of the new normal, and I can see some of the questions, we're not going back to the way that we were before, for sure. We've all seen how effectively we can work from a remote perspective. I also think that's absolutely true in terms of recruitment. I have no doubt that the interviews that I'm doing are as robust as the ones that were in person, and they're quicker to actually do, of course, in terms of just the sheer logistics. So I know we need to think about that some more, I'm sure, but it's instinctively much better than I thought it was going to be. So new way of working is going to depend largely on what colleagues are looking for. We're running a survey on that in a couple of weeks' time. It's obviously very difficult for us to tell. As Chris says, is that I do know there's a whole range. There are people who really want to get back because their circumstances are not helpful at home. There are people who would like to never come back, and then anything in between. And I think we'll end up with supporting colleagues on both ends of that within reason. But then there'll also be a new norm, if you like, for the majority, which would be some days of the week at home and some days of the week in the office. And I think the office time will be far more engaging on issues, engaging in meetings on specific elements of a project, where we all feel there's just that benefit from being a bit more creative together, possibly. And so that will bring changes to our work environment too, and how we configure our space. And those are all elements that we're looking at as we go into 2021, realistically, in terms of social distancing in the meantime.
Yeah, we won't go into the office with our laptops that we take into the office from home to sit down, work, and then at the end of the day we pack it up and go back home again. I think that's definitely. I actually hope that this will be a lasting change, that we don't do that. I have another question from the stream, and I'm directing it at you, Chris. It's coming directly from Sophie. Thank you, Sophie. You mentioned the hiring manager live chat that you have implemented, and Sophie would love to hear a little bit more about this. It sounds like a great idea, she says. Yeah,
so the biggest piece of advice I would also give is build your supply chain in advance. So when I say build it, have great relationships, because that's one thing that really helped me through this pandemic. I was able to call on people that I've been having conversation with for whether that's 6 months, 2 years. And I remember giving Ali Hackett, who's from Meet and Engage, give her a call. I remember it was a Saturday morning. It was just a week. It was the week before we went into lockdown. I was like, I need to get a facility, because if we have to close one of our offices, we have an IVR line. How do we make sure that we have stability that we could switch on live chat? And to me is that we've now seen our stats are showing that people prefer the phone line never went down, but people now prefer the live chat than having to make a phone call, because managers can do it on the mobile, they can have conversations, and the information that we can see is great. But the interesting thing is Ali and the Meet and Engage, their products are usually candidate facing. They're not built for internal. So they were adapting their technology to work for us as well. But the only way I say this worked is that I had a relationship with them already. I'd never done business with them. And I think these relationships are key for any success through this pandemic, or future, should I say, business continuity, is always have relationships and always be thinking is there may be a need for the organization.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And the next question is for you, Matt. The question comes from Natasha. Thank you. How do you measure trust in your organization?
Yeah, saw that. And I mean, the straight answer is we don't have a measure that we just go, there's trust, but maybe we should. In the colleague survey, we ask, find a way to do that. But we get a constituent result from the points that we do ask for. And I think it's what we see in the net effect. And we measure culture in the organisation. We measure within culture, do people understand what we're trying to achieve? Do they believe what we're trying to achieve? And then do they see it being demonstrated? And I think trust underpins all of that. We've seen that grow significantly through this period. It's obviously something that I'd love to see us maintain again and build on. And so I think you inherently see it in those kind of outcomes. But if I'm honest, yeah, we've not had a straight question to get a straight read on that. To be honest, on some degree, I'm okay taking that as being just a sense that we're bringing about. And if we were to make that a new value as well, I don't think we'd regret it. And generating conversations about how we maintain the trusted environment that I believe we've become very quickly would only be healthy, even if I couldn't measure it.
Absolutely. And you've mentioned a few times, I'm assuming I'm making an assumption here, happens in both your organizations, that you send surveys to your employees in a sort of frequent cadence so that you get their input directly. How regularly would you send those, Matt?
So we do a full survey every year. Many obviously do that more frequently now, but we go really detailed full survey every year. And then we do pulse surveys in between. And we don't have a fixed pattern to those, but they're every 3 to 6 months. So we keep getting a regular read on some key items like how our culture is progressing. The survey that we just did, it did check on engagement culture. So there were some of those kind of, through time elements that we're keen to see. But we did dedicate it entirely to COVID and whether we were putting the right tools in place for colleagues and whether we were communicating in the right way. So we asked very specific questions that we never have, obviously, before to get a very clear piece of feedback as to how well we're doing, to be honest.
Yeah, got it. Great. Same for you, Chris, or how do you?
I couldn't agree with more. Is that we just need to watch survey fatigue. It's tailoring that is what we want to get from it, and giving those questions that we've never needed to ask before. So it's very much a pulse survey. It's not we're just doing this for the sake of it. It's actually we're trying to understand is how we can really adapt and build on what we're currently offering. How do we make it better?
Thank you. So I have the final question here because we are coming up to time. This question is from Emma. Thank you, Emma. The question is, are you adapting your view on leadership capability or potential based on new insights and thoughts on leadership in the future?
So I'm happy to lead, Chris. Yeah.
Go for it.
And I'm going to cheekily just have a little go at another question in terms of flexibility and empathy. So if you don't mind. So in terms of leadership, yes, we are rethinking. As I said before, I think that we've seen a different leadership style. I think it's been more human because everyone can engage in the effects of a crisis that does affect us all. It's a leveler. And I think it's given, I suppose, people who might struggle to express what they're thinking about the corporation in a way that's meaningful for colleagues. It's changed that entirely. I also think we're keen on developing areas in our leaders because we just recognise how difficult it is for them too. And so I mentioned very briefly, we've got a tailored programme in place, which we're partnering with London Business School on. We actually were building a sort of leadership transformation programme with them. We've just put that to one side. And it's a COVID-related leadership programme now over the next couple of months. And it involves elements like resilience in leaders and supporting the company be resilient and supporting people within the company to be resilient. And so those are areas that we wouldn't necessarily have been looking at in the generic approach to leadership in the bank, but we are at the moment because I think you've got to respond to where we are. And so I think those are the immediate responses, but on an ongoing basis, as I say, I'm expecting to see coming through more clearly is that human element to leadership, the ability to connect, to understand the issues that everybody's got, and be able to do something about them and at least resonate with them. And I do want to just pick amongst, I thought it was a really interesting question in terms of people are fitting many hours of work into a small amount of time. Should there be more flexibility and empathy for those who are at home in that situation? The most challenging thing for me in this time has been how to be empathetic with people who are having, in every case, a different challenging situation, right? Because the way I view it is my challenges at home, I'm very fortunate. I've got 2 little ones, but my wife is basically dedicated in taking care of them. I feel very fortunate in all of this. Think about my colleagues if they're living alone, working from home, or they're coming in and they're concerned about interacting with customers or how they're transporting, and anything in between. Everyone has got concerns that need to be respected and as best as you can addressed. And I have found that the most challenging thing in terms of continuing to demonstrate that thought and that understanding to all our colleagues who obviously are sat there concerned about their own circumstances. So demonstrating that empathy is really challenging. Do I think we should have more flexibility? Absolutely. Because in the end, when I hear, as I did just last week on one of our regular calls within the company, a colleague say, you know, I'm taking care of my kids during the day and I'm working till very late every night. What can we do about that? My answer is, I really want you to talk to your boss, because personally I can't solve that. As an organisation, though, we need to trust each other enough that you can talk to your boss about it. We have to adjust the work that you're doing. That has to be the thing that gives, because you must prioritise your family. Family come first. And that's the message that we want to put to colleagues if that is the particular challenge for them. So we must be empathetic, we must adjust. Otherwise, people will not want to work for our organisations when we're past all of this.
Yeah, thank you for actually picking up on that question. I think it's really important to keep in mind that everybody is working hard. Whether it is the output is, you know, your normal job, or whether the output is on your family and homeschooling your children and or looking after elderly parents and whatever it might be. I think everybody is working incredibly hard. It might just be in slightly different areas that we don't all see and would normally maybe take for granted. Thank you both. Are there any final comments you want to squeeze in before I thank everybody and hand it back to Lisa, Chris, or Matt? No?
Chris, I will say one. I've got a final thought. The trust point again, and for managers at the moment, I just finished off with, I think we've now got away from seeing someone doing their job proves they're doing a good job. We've finally broken that. And I think that is a huge point in all of this that we definitely need to equip managers better with, because that's been a challenge for many of them. But we're output-based now as opposed to monitoring the input. And I think that's also a huge element, just thinking about those final questions there, that we need to and can leverage so we create better workplaces for our people.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Matt.
Just to add to that, I just think be realistic and maybe have to reset expectations that it's okay to be okay, but it's okay to be not okay. And that check-in with your colleagues, peer group, or direct responsibility for your team, just have that chat, have that conversation and make them feel comfortable and really show that trust that they've got.
Fantastic. Very inspiring words, both of you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to our audience for dialing in. It was a real pleasure to chat with you.